What if I told you that in IT, boring is actually good? That the quiet, uneventful systems you never hear about are the very ones keeping everything else running? Welcome to the world of storage. Storage isn't just interesting, it's absolutely foundational. Without it, all those exciting innovations like AI, cloud, and automation crumble. I mean, look, you got to keep all that information somewhere. With AI driving storage demands tenfold, knowing how to think about storage and which solutions to advocate for could make all the difference. It might just be the key to unlocking performance, optimization, and innovation. To unpack storage, unintended, I've called on two experts. Mike Sasse, Principal Technologist at Pure Storage, and Darren Livingston, Chief Technology Strategist at Pellera and longtime storage veteran. In this episode, we'll talk about why storage is like the basement of your house, how storage as a service is transforming the game, and why abstraction is the concept at the heart of it all. Michael, can you tell us a little bit about your role at Pure Storage and why understanding how storage operates is foundational to success?
I'm a principal technologist. So I've got about 13 states that I cover, and I basically cover every single customer that would fall under enterprise. So my role is just to, number one, work with customers to make sure that I can kind of share with them what we're doing as a company, our vision, our strategy, be a product specialist across our whole portfolio, and just in general, help all the different teams in the central enterprise region at Pure be successful. I also work a lot with our product management team. So taking direct customer feedback from the field, sharing what I'm hearing in the real world so that they can use that information for guiding how our products are being developed and what we're putting out there for customers. I think you're right. I think data is the most valuable asset on the entire planet. It really drives a lot of innovation. There's so many different things that are tied to successfully using and consuming data, whether it be medicine, finance, science, technology. We're even seeing it in politics, right? There's a lot of different things that are data-driven in the political world. So it's such a valuable asset. And I think oftentimes some things get overlooked with storage. For IT specifically to be successful, I think when it comes to storage, you've got to make sure that whatever you're using for storing your data is secure, because we live in a very volatile world right now. Ransomware is on the rise. But I think importantly, it's also got to be very simple to automate. It's got to be very simple to operate and maintain. Plus, it's got to be extremely quick to access and consume. When somebody wants data at a corporate level, it's because they want to build something with it. They want to deliver revenue for their company. So the longer and longer they have to wait for that storage, the longer and longer it takes.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely spot on. Darren, I can't say how excited I am to have you on the podcast. We've known each other for several years now. You have been in the industry for 20 plus years. I think my question to you as you introduce yourself, I'm just curious, what's your perspective on how storage organizations have changed in the way that they've thought about storage in the last 20 years? I mean, you started out early on with the rise of the internet, and here we are now as AI is just going bonkers. I'm curious what your take is.
That analogy that I heard this several years ago, where they were saying where data is the fuel to an AI factory, to a refinery, for an outcome. Everyone's taking storage for granted. Look at our phones. Our phones is a storage platform. Look at our devices, our cloud, our social media. There's data everywhere. Everyone has like smart homes. There's data everywhere. And that data is now being leveraged and consumed for outcomes through AI models. I think it's super exciting. I think storage is everywhere. I think it's in data centers. It's in the edge. It's on you. It's everywhere. And that is only going to keep growing and growing. And Mike's comment about simplicity, spot on. I mean, if it's simple to consume, simple to store, those outcomes, those business outcomes that business are looking for, and just anybody, end users are looking for.
I think the foundation metaphor works really well, right? I mean, If you're building a new gazebo and you want it to be larger, right? Well, you can only build it out as far as that foundation will go, right? People are building new AI products, expanding their businesses to leverage this new technology. Well, they need extra space for those extra chairs or that 60-inch TV, right?
Yeah, no, I would agree. I mean, I think as time goes on and the models, I'll just dive into AI a little bit because I think this is what's made data and storage so cool again. And this is people buy these GPUs and they get into the models and then they realize I need data and storage to provide to that GPU. And the spinning wheel of latency is not going to fly in that space. And the more data you throw into a model, whatever model that is, and you have an outcome, the more you put it, the more data you provide, the better the outcome, the better the experience, right? More accuracy, so on and so forth, right?
Yeah. And then on top of that data explosion of the data itself, now we're creating so much data about the data.
Yeah.
The data, which is really critical in AI.
The rag sprawl, almost you want to call it, the inferencing sprawl. Everybody goes, hey, I want to do this. And you just, oh my God, now it's cascading and you're having outcomes upon outcomes upon outcomes. And then everybody's like, I don't understand why we're reading up so much storage now. So
the limiting factor in training a model oftentimes is the model is training, but you need to be dropping your checkpoints down somewhere. Where is that happening? Right? Because if you keep it in memory and one of your 10,000 GPUs fails, you lose that compute wall time, which is so valuable. How do you prevent losing that storage? So before we dive into modern solutions, let's set the table. What are some of the most common problems that you hear from clients? And what risks do organizations face if they don't fix the challenges they've got before moving into a modern tech stack, whether that's AI, cloud adoption, hybrid model?
I hear a lot from people, complexity is a really big challenge because the more and more complex you build a system, the more inherently risky it is. So I'm hearing from folks like, I have what seems like an army of people managing my storage, and they have to make so many different decisions about how to configure it, maintain it, deploy it, provide storage to all the different parts of the business. And that's just too much. I hear from a lot of people as well that they're sick and tired of paying for the same storage over and over again. That rigmarole of, I buy something, I sweat that asset for 4 to 5 years, it reaches its end of its useful life, and then I've got this overlap of the old technology sitting there, and I'm paying for the new technology sitting there, and I'm moving the data from one to the other. It's extremely wasteful. And power is another big one. AI, right? I mean, power is a huge concern. Right here in Minnesota, we've got Meta's building a data center, right? And you can read all about the different things they're doing to improve the power grid as part of building that data center. Well, power's a precious resource. And could you imagine building out a data center and having to outbid a competitor for access to power? That could be a reality in the future. Or having to build your own infrastructure to supply power for the tools that your business needs to use to remain competitive and gain an advantage. And the other thing I hear a lot is security. Like I said, ransomware, unfortunately, huge problem. And the more valuable data becomes, the more likely it is to be under attack and to held ransom. So I say to customers a lot, you've got to have a safe and you've got to have a burglar alarm when it comes to the data, whether that's storing it as some sort of like a golden copy of the data, backups, more importantly, snapshots, replication, but you've got to have visibility into the data as well. Who's trying to access it? Who's trying to do bad things? Who's trying to lock me out from that data? I think all of those are critical challenges if you want to get into the AI space, or if you want to adopt a cloud model, you've got to address those.
So, what I hear you saying, Mike, is you sort of need to know what you've got in your basement or what sort of foundation do you have before you can start marching forward.
Yeah, absolutely.
Darren, as leaders prepare their storage for the next generation to handle AI or automation workloads, I mean, where would you recommend that they start?
I think what they have to do is have a very good understanding of what they have today for data, right? I think, Mike, you alluded to it, and I think it sometimes gets very confusing for people around the governance of data. There's the securing of data, and then there's data governance, which are two totally different things, right? I think what ends up happening too is, I think as a leader, a technologist, technical leader, I should say, they should be looking, okay, maybe not today, the outcome, the applications and workloads I want to support 2-3 years out. I mean, object storage was unheard of 10 years ago. And now it's become the big thing because object storage is was a cloud thing. Now it's an on-prem thing. And applications and storage and data and storage administrators are using object storage in more of a traditional way, archival, let's say, using it from a backup DR perspective. 10 years ago, that wasn't the case, right? I think as a leader and as a thought leader, when addressing your storage, you have an open mind, understand what you have today, and we're trying to go 2-3 years from now. I think AI drives a lot of that. I also think that the world of data analytics is also driving what kind of storage platform, what kind of protocols I should be looking at, what kind of model should I use, on-prem, cloud, a little bit of both. You know what I mean? Like, I think that world of traditional, I'm going to buy a block storage array, like Mike said, and I'm going to sweat that bad boy out for 5 years, and then I'm just going to get another one. I think those days I think as leaders, we have to be thinking a little bit beyond that, right?
And Darren, I think another thing too that's really critical, I run into this all the time when I talk to customers. A lot of times as they're thinking about what they want to build on top of that foundation, one of the things that they're really missing is key metrics to allow them to make data-driven decisions on how they want to build that infrastructure. I have conversations with people a lot of times about like cyber resiliency. And one of the first things I like to ask when they show me, like, I've got these applications and this is what is the lifeblood of our business, what's the cost of downtime? And a lot of people don't even know that, right? And it's really hard to make decisions about what you want to do infrastructure-wise if, first and foremost, you don't have metrics to determine how am I going to build this layer of protection for this different asset or for this application. If you don't know what exactly it costs to have it down, to have that data missing, you don't really know what you can or should be spending or building to protect it, to make it highly available, or even just knowing what's the cost of time to deploy. So if you have a data scientist waiting, right, that is a cost. That costs money. GPUs not being utilized, that's a cost. Right. So I think a lot of times too, what people overlook or have a difficult time wrangling is, I need metrics. I need data so I can formulate SLAs and I can use those to make data-driven decisions on how I should build that infrastructure on top of the foundation.
Data is the new gold, right? Data is oil, right? And you're spot on about the metrics. Absolutely, right? Again, I think storage is always taken for granted as just being there. And now there's a real value and it just continues to grow, right? So
it seems then that legacy systems then by default have these data silos, right? Which I would imagine means that there's high latency and it's a headache when you try to grow. I mean, what are some of the game-changing innovations that companies have leveraged to escape those traps? Is the answer just object storage, or is there other things?
No, there's a lot of different things that come into play, like data silos and latency and growth headaches. I think one of the big challenges is something I mentioned before, is that traditional life cycle when it comes to storage. So I talked about sweating an asset for 5 years, right? Well, what happens if the product is just 4 years old and I need to expand it? I need it to grow. Do I throw good money at bad, expanding something that I'm probably going to be retiring within a year or two? Do I buy just brand new and throw away a perfectly good asset that has a year or two of life left in it? I think that's where I'm seeing a lot of folks. This isn't really a technology innovation, but it's more of a business innovation. I'm seeing a lot more folks starting to lean into consuming storage as a service instead. Specifically, I mean, we see it in the cloud, right, Darren? I mean, in your world, cloud, one of the biggest things about it that I get told from people is, one, it's flexible, so I can scale up and down. Two, I can fail way faster and way cheaper in the cloud than I can with buying gear, going and asking the board for budget, and buying assets. So I think one of the things that people are doing to address that challenge from a business perspective is starting to look into things like storage as a service. How do I just consume my storage as a utility, essentially, and let the vendor, my technology partner, right? Let them make sure that they're just putting the right stuff in my data center or in my colo to make sure that I get the outcomes that I need and I'm not worrying so much about the technology. And I think as well, another thing too is building proper automation so that you don't have data sitting in an island or a silo all the time. It's accessible and consumable from different parts of the infrastructure. So you don't end up with, Darren, you said it perfectly. I think data is the new gold. It's the new oil. You don't want that hidden away in Fort Knox. You want to leverage that data. So you need to make sure that you've got easy means of accessing that data, no matter where it might live, so that it can get moved to different things. Like if you've got to move it from a traditional file platform to objects so that a different application can consume it, or whatever that might be, you've got to make sure that you've got that mobility and automation so that you can actually get access to the oil.
I would add one thing, Jonathan, just about your comment earlier. Is object the new way? No, it's not. It's very workload. There's an element of the dependency of the workload, right? Look, we still have mainframes. Mainframe storage is still a thing, right? And that traditional fiber channel storage, block storage is still around. File storage, it's going to be around. It's going to be used. And Jonathan, I know you've used file because of the work you and I have done together, right? So that's all there. Mike's comment about the automation, tying it all together, that is the cool part. That is something that's really come out. I've worked with clients that actually went backwards, Mike, where they had their storage on-prem and they were leveraging the cloud to process their output and then bringing it back. So they were going back and forth as another direction, right? And it was I never thought about doing it like that, but it really worked for this particular client where they were leveraging the cloud back and forth, using their on-prem storage, using cloud storage, and producing an outcome. So yeah, just something a little bit different than as a service as well, right?
So far, Mike and Darren have made it clear. Data may be the new oil, but without a place to store and secure it, the value slips through your fingers. From ransomware to rising complexity, the old model of sweating assets for 5 years simply doesn't cut it in an AI-driven world. Which raises the big question. If storage is no longer just a box in the basement, but a true strategic enabler, what does it take to build a modern storage experience? Whether in the cloud, on-prem, or somewhere in between, let's dig into that next. Why are people excited about what Pure's doing with Fusion? I mean, what problems is Fusion solving?
Well, Fusion for us at Pure is that next layer up of abstraction. We've done it in the hardware layer for nearly 15 years now. And what we're doing now at a higher level is building into our products a federation feature that we call Fusion. And the end goal for Fusion is really that eventually there is no word Fusion. It's just part of the normal way that you consume Pure storage assets. So what Fusion is, it allows you to take all of your Pure products and federate them together as a fleet. And then you can carve them up into regions, availability zones. You could designate racks if you wanted to, power runs, however you wanted to carve them up. And then it gives you, first and foremost, a single pane of glass management. So you can log into any endpoint in the entire fleet and manage any other endpoint in the entire fleet. And it allows you to build workload presets. And what those are, so let's say, for example, Jonathan, if you needed a workload where you said, okay, I need maybe a traditional NFS mount. And what I need out of it is it's going to be leveraged for a specific application That application is considered gold within the business. And the business then requires that kind of a gold workload then needs this level of performance. It needs this type of data protection. It needs to be replicated in this way with ransomware protection. Historically, that means that a person either builds a script to do that on a regular basis, or they manually go in and start clicking around. They start typing things into a command line on the storage endpoint that they have calculated that your workload should live on. What our workload presets do is you can just build ahead of time Jonathan's gold workload. And right in there, it says it's an NFS mount. It needs to be on this kind of a product because it needs this type of performance. Since it's a gold workload, it should get snapped once a day. It should be retained for a week. It should get replicated to a different geography to make sure it's protected. And it should have ransomware protection enabled. And Fusion will automatically make a recommendation based on performance and capacity that Jonathan's gold workload should go here. So it's building that upper layer of automation and abstraction.
Okay, so Fusion is just advancements in abstraction management.
Yeah, like if you think of the big hyperscalers or the public cloud, when you go into like Azure, AWS, and you request a storage resource, outside of maybe choosing where you want it deployed in terms of a region and availability zone, you're not really making a technology-driven decision. You're making an outcome-based decision. So this is all about doing that same type of a thing with enterprise storage. So having a means to just go, I need a thing and it needs to perform like this and be protected like this. Go build it for me. And that's what Fusion
Keep it
does.
simple, stupid.
Yeah.
Simplification, man. Again, the boring storage thing, right?
The infrastructure should be smart enough to just go do that stuff for you. And Fusion even has its own APIs. So you can even build automation within like ServiceNow, for example, where you could just open a ticket in ServiceNow and it automatically attaches a billing code. So you've got chargeback or showback or whatever you might want to do there. It's being billed to the correct department. It's aware of the things that you're allowed to provision based on your role within the company. It might have to go through certain approvals. And then ServiceNow can just make an API call to Fusion, not an individual array, but the whole fleet. And go provision Jonathan's gold workload and off it goes.
I mean, you've talked a bit about how, this idea of modernization, right? Not holding on to legacy things, moving towards the future. The future is having the infrastructure manage itself. Everything's abstracted. Everything just automatically takes care of workload needs. As leaders think about modernizing, for those that are concerned about cost, what kind of ROI have you seen from organizations that have embraced the abstraction model? Is there an additional cost to it, or how do they think about that in terms of measuring the ROI they're getting out of it?
Well, a lot of it goes back to the metrics thing I mentioned earlier. You've got to first understand, if you implement something like this, how do I measure success? How do I know that I'm actually getting an ROI? So if before it took a week to provision a storage resource for someone to leverage, what was the lost productivity? What was the lost revenue by that person waiting for that? And if that week went down to 5 minutes, what's the impact? How do I measure that? So I think that's a big part. Secondly, I think the protection side as well. So knowing what it costs for downtime. Human error is usually the reason for downtime. So if we can take human error out of the equation and have the infrastructure autonomously making decisions and making sure that everything gets deployed exactly the way we want it, following all the compliance guidelines that we have, governance, data protection standards, things like that, we need a way to measure that so that we can show the business that this is the state that we were in before. And if we implement this, I can show you how the data science team is able to innovate more. And that is going to produce X amount of additional revenue. or data is in a better protected state, I can show to you that it's being deployed in a way that's safe and secure. It's recoverable within X amount of time because everything's automated. And I can show you that we're going to have this much lower downtime because of doing this. We're going to be able to recover quicker because of doing something like this. And if you tie all of that back to dollars and cents, it's really hard for a business leader to argue with that.
When you're trying to get buy-in from the C-suite on modernizing, right? It's thinking through the implications. And I guess that's where things can be challenging, as Darren was talking about, right? It comes down to having that communication with the business side of the house, having business buy-in so that you can align business and technical KPIs together, right? Mm-hmm. Keeping your CRM up is mission critical, right? Keeping your accounting system up is mission critical. It's that goal, these gold applications that can't fail. And then the challenge then becomes having those two parties partner together to explain the value to leadership.
Yeah. And Darren, I'd be curious on your thoughts on this too, because when I talk to customers, I think sometimes what I try to get across to them is that your IT organization within your company, you're really just kind of like another managed services provider to them, right? You're under constant competitive threat, whether it's the public cloud, a different MSP, whatever. And if you start thinking about your IT organization in that way, the need to automate to create better outcomes for your customer, the business, becomes a lot more clear.
I think internal IT over the years, it was always considered like a cost center. And now IT has to consider them to be a profit. I don't want to use the words profit center, but being value added back to the business itself, right? And finding competitiveness through automation, through different approaches to managing storage, for instance, or cloud for that matter, right? I mean, I like that analogy where they're constantly compared to another approach, right? And I think the smart technical leaders, they've identified that and they're trying to find ways to bring value back to the organizations, back to the different stakeholders, back to the business in general. I think my analogy is IT is I'm my IT's customer, right? So I want IT to take good care of me, right? So
as somebody who's spent their career, for lack of a better way of saying it, playing around with computers, I've definitely been an annoyance to many IT departments in terms of trying to have, but also not have shadow IT of my compute workloads.
Yeah.
But why do people go out for shadow IT though, Jonathan? It's because internal IT isn't able to meet the needs of you, right? They're not there to support you, right? So,
yeah, every individual within an organization has got their own measured business objectives that they are working against, right? And if IT can't deliver what I need to meet those objectives, some people just go somewhere else. And that is not what you want to be happening. That's one of the worst things, right? In the old days, it used to be that server hidden in a closet that somebody built to build an application that IT is not aware of. Today, it's somebody putting highly critical company documents and data up in a cloud drive somewhere.
Right. Or as it was for a long time, right? GPUs sitting underneath my desk. Because AI workloads were hard to get authorized. They're expensive. They're intensive and oftentimes dynamic, right? It's not necessarily something that's consistent. The lab that Darren runs, he remembers when we were working on a couple projects and it sounded like jets were taking off in the other room because we were spinning it hard, and all of a sudden he knew when we stopped model training because then things quieted down a little bit. Looking forward into the future with dynamic AI workloads, and I mean, nobody knows where this is going right now, right? One of my peers has a great quote that he likes to use. If anybody tells you where AI is going right now, they're trying to sell you something. Because nobody knows where this is going. From your perspective, what do you think storage is going to need to look like in 3 to 5 years?
Well, I think in my opinion, storage, all the old legacy storage problems of the past have to go away. And what I mean by that is from a business perspective, I don't want to be buying the same terabytes over and over again. That's just a wasted cost. It creates complexity, additional work for all of my staff. I don't want anybody having to deal with that. I think whatever you have from an infrastructure standpoint should be very easily replaceable with no consequence whatsoever. No downtime, no performance hit. Everything should just be continuously in flux under the covers, under those layers of abstraction we talked about. And storage has got to be built in such a way to allow that to happen. So at Pure, we call that evergreen. That's the means for the business program we have for our customers, where we're upgrading their arrays in place just as part of their regular maintenance contract. And we want it to be continuously evolving, with the idea being that we'd rather reward them for owning our product instead of punishing them by forcing them to replace it. So I think that infrastructure should be something that has an API first mentality, so you can automate against it in whatever way you see fit. I think the old legacy problems of migrations, of downtime, slowness because of maintenance, all that has to go away. We don't have time for any of that anymore. You don't have time for that anymore. I don't have time for that anymore. If I want to show somebody a picture of my dog, it should just be there. I don't care what it's on. So I think storage has got to take an approach of, I've got to have a better customer experience where the technology is continuously upgradable without any consequence. I'm not continuously rebuying that storage over and over again. And for AI workloads of the future, it's got to have 100% uptime, 100% performance all the time. Because if data is the new oil, I can't have my oil pumps just stopping, right? I got to keep it going.
Right. That makes sense. So as we close this episode out, do you have any, to the both of you, do you have any final words of advice? If someone's leading the charge on storage transformation in their organization, they're thinking about modernizing, trying to, if it's even possible, future-proof storage, at least for the short term, what's some of the advice that you'd share with them?
I think, honestly, people have to, going forward, be open to new technologies. There's organizations that haven't, to Mike's point, they just keep doing the same thing over and over again. I think going forward, organizations have to be open to new technologies, that API first approach, that abstraction, the automation. I think that is all where we're going forward, where organizations have to embrace it and really embrace it and go towards that direction and understand and value their data, value their storage. Their storage is the single most important thing an organization has today, and really embrace it and protect it and just be open to different approaches. I think that would be my recommendation to anybody.
For me, if I'm talking to someone who wants to be an internal change agent when it comes to storage within their organization, you have to be willing to do something that's a little bit uncomfortable, and that's take off your technologist hat and put on a salesperson hat. You have to be an internal salesperson within your company, and that means talk to the application teams, the stakeholders, the business leaders. Try to find out the outcomes that they're all looking to achieve. What are they getting measured against? You've got to have that information and data. Because at the end of the day, storage transformation, if no one cares about the outcomes that it's going to provide, no one's going to sign off on budget, right, to do any of that. So I think that's one of the challenges for technologists is you've got to start to think a little bit salesy, right? And you've got to start talking to those people and understand the challenges that they deal with. What are the things that cause them to fail? Or what are the things that cause them to wait? Or that makes it difficult for them to do their jobs. And once you have some of that information, it's a little easier to moonwalk into storage transformation because, now I've identified the problems. Now I can start to talk about how we can transform things to address those problems and what outcomes will be from doing that versus the status quo today. And just work with a strategic vendor, somebody like us at Pure, your trusted channel partners, GSIs, and talk about the outcomes that you want to achieve and how you can move things from the status quo to a better model.
It sounds like you're both saying that innovation is key and aligning your KPIs with the business's KPIs. And maybe the best way to do that is through an API.
I see what you did there.
Well said.
Well, gentlemen, it was a pleasure to spend this time with you. I really appreciate your investment in this.
Yeah, absolutely. Great conversation, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you to Michael and Darren for this insightful conversation. I gotta say, storage, not feeling so boring now. In fact, it's critical. When done right, it's an invisible, flexible, consumption-driven system that scales with you. We kept coming back to abstraction for good reason. It's about the end user. Imagine being able to say, I need storage that's fast and secure, and having the system take care of the rest. At the end of the day, to unlock the future, you need a reliable place to store the past. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to subscribe to Edge of IT on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you tune in. Got more questions? Visit us at Pellera.com.